like to call the meeting of the school committee to order. First item on the agenda is minutes. Can I have a motion on minutes?
Yeah, a motion to approve the minutes from the October 9th school committee meeting.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any comments, corrections, omissions? All in favor? The only thing I would have on my chairman's report I note is the first item on Bob's report, so I'll let Bob do that.
So I think it would be appropriate for us all to take a moment of silence for the Herlihy family. Okay. I always like to offer positive student reports, so I also want to congratulate the football team for beating Air, and now they're the Tri-League champions with Littleton and Lunenburg. Congratulations to the girls varsity soccer team for clinching another league championship. The Department of Elementary and Secondary Education District Review that was conducted way back in January 2014 finally came in and went up online, so I've shared that with the school committee, the links to that, and the MLT is working on a PowerPoint presentation for the December 18th meeting, because after we had the initial understandings in the exit interview, we found out the things that we needed to work on, so we have addressed some things, we're working on other things, and there's other things we'll probably want to work on in the future, because it really is about a cycle of continuous improvement, and in Maynard, we really believe in that. So we're looking forward to sharing that with you. Also, I wanted to share with the public, the Green Meadow PTO has been doing incredible work for a long time, and the new leadership actually sent out a flyer to the parents that just described the wonderful relationship of how they support our academics at Green Meadow School. And I just felt it was important for me to give a little summary, because not everybody has a child at Green Meadow. They might not know what a wonderful PTO we have, and it's been a long history with great leadership in the past as well. But they do a lot of enrichment programs that include the Drumlin Farm Animal Habitat, Science Time from Jam Time, weather program in the Discovery Museum. They've had musicians and paleontologists and naturalists, and they go to the Paul Revere House, and they fund books for our leveled libraries. They fund the Vernal Pool program, field trips, they support the teachers, and they provide literacy-related programs. So I just wanted to give a little shout-out to our Green Meadow PTO for the wonderful job that's been done in the past with our past leadership, because this is really a history of what they've done in the past. And moving forward, I've already met with the new president, Stacy Rosander, and I know Linda, the treasurer. We go back to our Green Meadow third grade study together. But I got to meet with them, and we talked a lot, and I'm just really excited about the positive leadership and the way we're moving forward at Green Meadow. It's great to have a PTO that supports our academic endeavors in such a wonderful way. I wanted to report to the school committee, I actually have a doctoral intern from Boston University that's actually going to come, and I'm going to tour them around the buildings tomorrow. They're interested in doing their internship in Maynard because they were so impressed with Amy Gay and the presentation that she did at the NEAS conference.
Oh, really?
And they were very impressed with our school district.
That can't be true.
He was one of the presenters there, and
really?
when he heard all the wonderful things we're doing in Maynard,
Wow.
he said, I'd like to do my internship to the professor who was there as well, and so they contacted me. He's going to come, and we're going to figure out what kind of projects we can give him for 500 hours. But it's another resource that we can bring in, and he's a pretty knowledgeable guy, so I'm excited to have his support for our
What's his area
administration.
of specialty?
The evaluation system.
Awesome.
So he had done some presentations on that as well.
Okay, oh, right,
So-
right.
But he also has a lot of expertise in technology, and I know that Charles has been working on our 5-year technology plan, so that might be an avenue too. So I'm pretty excited. He's got a lot to offer, and I'm excited that we're getting those kind of resources because people are finding out how wonderful Maynard is.
Oh, that's great.
And actually, on a similar venue, I got to thank Jamal, because Carrie Baskin contacted me, and I've also introduced him to Bill and a few other town officials, the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen chairman. She's going to be writing an article, and I believe it's going to be in the next Boston Globe on next Sunday, this coming Sunday. And it's going to be in the real estate section about how wonderful Maynard is. So just thought I'd let you know that everybody should be buying the Boston Globe. I think it's this Sunday. If I'm wrong, then it's probably the next Sunday, but I'm pretty sure it's this Sunday coming up. So I'm excited about that, and it's great that our school committee members are singing the praises of our district, and people are hearing it. So thank both of you for that. And the last thing I wanted to do, Maynard is a special district, and the school committee and the teachers, we've had a long history of lifelong learning, teachers taking pride in their professional development, and we have outstanding educators. There's a new initiative for ELL instruction called RETEL. All educators will need to get this course or certification in order to continue their certification. And I decided to take it myself, because I'm a lifelong learner too. And as part of the process, I have to go and observe classrooms and learn how to observe good ELL instruction. And it was really exciting for me. The first teacher who volunteered was Nancy Messina, who's in our audience. And I have a little something for Nancy, if you wouldn't mind coming up and getting this. And Mary Beth Wallace was the second. If you wouldn't mind bringing this to her tomorrow, I'd appreciate it. But I can't thank them enough, because Nancy, great job. What a wonderful classroom, and what incredible instruction is going on in our classrooms. And it's not just about instructing ELLs, which are English language learners. It's best practice for all literacy instruction. It was incredible to see the fidelity with which that they taught that they learned the strategies, obviously last year when they took the course, and now I'm seeing it happen in the classroom. I'm very proud of our staff, and I can't thank the individual staff members, especially some of our veteran teachers who are so confident to bring me into their classroom voluntarily and allow me to observe that. So I can't thank you enough, Nancy, and please thank Mary Beth and tell her I mentioned it. And that's all I have tonight for the superintendent's
All right.
report.
Thank you, Bob. Next on the agenda is student representative report, so Janelle and Connor.
And we're just giving you an update on the high school. The sports teams are doing phenomenal this year. Football, as you probably know, football has their first playoff game at home against Baypad tomorrow. And there's a tailgate going on before it, so the school's getting really excited for it. Also, boys and girls soccer has made the playoffs. The girls are undefeated league champions, so they're really happy about that. The boys made the playoffs after kind of rough start. I'm on the team, so. So we're doing really well in sports, and it's really rounding out the whole school. They're all getting behind football and soccer, and it's really great atmosphere at the games.
First term is coming to a successful end with many students becoming acclimated to their regular classes. Grades close for term 1 tomorrow. There will be a mock gubernatorial election taking place through everyone's school email on Monday. In theater news, the play this year has been chosen to be Bye Bye Birdie. Also, the cast has been decided.
And so we're doing really well at school. We're getting a lot of unifying events going, like the mock election. They'll be able to use their iPads and take like an online survey, and they can go for Copley or Baker, and they have the 4 questions on there, and even Patty Dolan and Kate Hogan raised them. So it's really a great thing, getting kids politically active, and I think it'll be good for the school. So that's all we had to report. If you guys have any questions, I'm really glad to answer them. That's pretty much it. We're in good shape.
Have you been deluged with campaign ads or anything through this whole process?
Morning announcements has gone rather.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Well, if there's any further questions for the students? Well, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda are citizens' comments. Any comments for today? Going once, twice? All right, moving on to then the special education CPAC update. So were you presenting, Jill?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Green. I'm the Director of Student Services. I regularly, usually every other year or so, I'll come, and hopefully we'll be able to move it forward to come every year and just give a little update on special education in Maynard, what's current, and an opportunity to ask questions. So we're going to start, and I'm going to give a brief overview of special education, and then Jim O'Leary from CPAC will then kind of come in and talk a little bit about their work. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about, so I'm the Director of Student Services, and under Student Services, there's special education, preschool, English language learner education, and then also responsible for civil rights and any needs of homeless students. So there's a number of different things that are covered under the Office of Student Services, but tonight I'm just going to speak specifically to special education. Just to talk a little bit of background for anybody who might be new to special education and schools to see how it all works. So special education is one component of the whole larger system. And to think about what influences special education practice, and it's a complicated combination of variables all kind of intersecting together for special education. So I kind of use this visual with special education in the middle. There's all these things kind of influencing what we do. But looking at the list one by one, one is the federal special education law and its accompanying regulations. Special education is legally mandated, and how we go about doing it and what it looks like. We need to follow the federal law that's been around for about 40 years, and every once in a while it changes. But that's our guiding foundation. And then in addition to that, we have Massachusetts special education law and regulations, and oftentimes Massachusetts, being Massachusetts, goes above and beyond the federal law, so there's a number of things that we have to do that guides us around that. In addition to that, there's case law, and that's any type of federal sort of court or state litigation and the court cases, and that influences what we do and how we do things as well in terms of the different interpretations of the law. And oftentimes, this is important to note because sometimes someone will say, well, why did you do something different? The law didn't change, but there's a new court case with a new finding, and that will actually impact the whole field and how we do things. In addition to that, what we do day to day is influenced by best practice in education research in terms of the changes in the field and what the research is saying. There's also current trends that's maybe not research-based, but what people are talking about and what people are doing, and that influences both from special ed and general education. In addition to that, special education is influenced by general education, so we're one part of the greater whole, and it's all interrelated. And then the other factor that kind of influences what special education looks like here in Maynard are the Maynard students. And it's important, you know, given that we're small, it's so nice that we're small, but as students change, we need to change as well. Just to take a minute or two just to talk a little bit about the federal special education law. This is the foundation in terms of what we do and how we do it. These fundamental principles have been in place since the law was first passed about 40 years ago, and they haven't changed. There's been additional things put on top of it, but the principles are generally the same. The first principle is zero reject, and that means basically that translates to all means all. That for students, regardless of the nature of their disability, the intensity, severity of their disability, that we are responsible for educating them. There's also free, appropriate public education, and people often refer to that as FAPE. And what FAPE is it's free to parents, so that then becomes the responsibility of the school. And appropriate is that is individualized specifically for students. And this is where we see the students in special ed have IEPs, which are individualized education programs, and the IEP needs to be appropriate for that particular student, and that's FAPE for that student. Then there's also non-discriminatory evaluation, which means we assessment and evaluation of a student is an essential part of the process, and then we need to look at the individual student and evaluate them based on their specific needs and disabilities. There's procedural due process that parents have an important role in this whole process, and they can accept, reject school proposals and plans, and then there's a very specifically outlined step-by-step process if there's a disagreement, and that's considered the procedural due process. And then there's the least restrictive environment, where sometimes people refer to that as LRE. And then there's two ways to think about least restrictive environments. One is from a big picture point of view in terms of the least restrictive environment is the general education classroom. And then we can move toward, in Massachusetts, the lingo is full inclusion in a general ed class. There's partial inclusion. You can be in a substantially separate class. You can be in a separate school. You can be in a residential school. You can even be in a hospital. So that's the line. But with the regular class is the least restrictive, and being in like a home or hospital setting is the most restrictive. But then you need to look at the least restrictive for a particular individual student. So for most students, the least restrictive environment is the general ed classroom. But for some students, for that particular student, the least restrictive environment may be a special day school. So you need to take that, in terms of what makes sense for the individual student. So again, these are the foundations in terms of how we operate. Then kind of looking specifically at Maynard and taking into consideration all those influences. Right now, as of October 1st, when we have to do the October 1st report to the Department of Education, we had at that snapshot in time 251 students in special education, which comes out to, at that day, it was 17.7% of our students. And we usually are right around the state rate. And then, so it kind of always fluctuates into the 16, 17%. And then right now at that time, in the October 1st, we had 13 students in out-of-district programs, and the majority of those were in 6th grade and higher. And I pointed out to illustrate that we do service the majority of our students here in district, and that we work as a whole, everybody works really hard in order to do that, to meet the students' needs here in Maynard. Then also to talk about, and here's certain terminology, in terms of the categories of students that we serve. We have to identify students in specific categories for the state based on the nature of their disability. So it's learning disabilities, communication impairments, developmental delays, intellectual impairments, emotional impairments, and autism are our primary disability areas that we serve, and that's consistent with the state. So a lot of what we're doing is very consistent with the whole state. Things to be aware of in terms of what I'm seeing as current trends that we have is that we're seeing a continuing increase in the needs of our preschoolers. We're seeing an increase in the number of students that have been identified as having autism spectrum disorders. And then recently we've been seeing an increase in the number of students with more significant mental health issues. So that will drive what we do and how we service students in some of our programming going forward. And it's important for us to monitor all this because in order to meet the needs of the students, we always, really need to be looking, way ahead. Just thinking about this, the services that we have here in district, we serve students from age 3 to 22. 22 is the state cutoff range. So we serve students, that all right here in Maynard. Our students have, diverse program needs. So one slice does not fit all, so we try to meet the needs of all the students by offering a continuum of different programs. So priorities for us, big picture, is that programming in terms of the services that we offer students, and because special education is so heavily regulated, a lot of what we have to work on is compliance. So in order to do that, we need to kind of consistently consider everything that's influencing us and evaluate and change. I'm not going to get into the whole compliance, as you must hear often, where in addition to all the federal requirements, there's quite a lot, and there's continuous thing for the Massachusetts Department of Education, all these new initiatives. But I want to focus more on the program. So we offer a number of different in-district programs, and it's important to have a general sense of what that's all about. So by us focusing on quality programs in district, we can service the majority of our students here in Maynard. We want to offer the continuum of services here in Maynard, and it's like students are in their neighborhood schools. And then it's also, as much as it costs, it actually saves money. And I bring this up to set a context, you know, for understanding around budget requests for special education that oftentimes will ask for money, but to do certain things that in the long run actually save money. If you look at, you know, transportation costs, just specifically for special education transportation, by having more students here in district, we're actually spending less money on transportation. So it's important to see that context. Our programs, just general, you know, we make it a point to have structured environments and predictable routines, highly specialized programming, and specialized curriculum as well for students. Just one example, we have a number, but one example to highlight, because this is our entry point to the district, is our preschool program. And we're really proud that we have an EYC accreditation for all our integrated classes. We have highly specialized multisensory instruction to meet the needs of all students. We serve students with a wide range of disabilities, but also community students as well. And that the teachers really work hard to provide that specialized instruction for everybody. Our preschool links to kindergarten and on up. We have ongoing assessment of students. We provide opportunities for all students, and it's really important to focus on that early childhood education because that's the foundation, and all the research is saying that that has improved outcomes for the future. Just a little bit in terms of what we're working on. There's a lot more, but the major priorities is a lot of new expectations for us in terms of compliance and new regulations. So we're working really hard in order to meet those and document those. We're working to address the current trends that I spoke to in terms of preschoolers or students with autism spectrum disorders, as well as students with mental health issues in terms of what our programming should look like to meet their needs. There's been a big push at the state and federal level in terms of what should we be doing to transition students out of high school and into the post-secondary world. And so we've been looking at a lot of our high school and post-secondary transition programming and how we can work with the students to maximize their transition to real life. We've been spending a lot of time talking about social skills and social thinking, and that we're putting an emphasis on that because students, if they can improve those skills, that will help them all around in terms of how they interact with others and engage in their academics and how they're prepared for life. And then another major initiative is that we've been focusing a lot on collaborating with the CPAC and improving communication with parents and connecting with parents. And this is how I'm transitioning to Jenna O'Leary's presentation on the CPAC, and she will share with you all the different things that we're doing, what the CPAC specifically is doing and what we're doing together to move forward. And I guess before we transition to Jen, does anybody have any specific questions for me on special education?
Just one question that I thought of, Jill. I think it's great that, I think you said there was only 13 students that are going out of district for this, which means obviously the vast majority are staying in district and getting the needs that, you know, obviously what they need. Of those 13 that are out of district, do you know, you may not know, but do you know why they chose to do that? Was it they felt like they didn't have it?
The way the process works, it's a team decision, so we're guided by making decisions within the context of a team. And for those particular students, the team decided that those students, their needs would be better met in another setting, and that's really typically what that happens is after that we've done everything within the context of what we can do here. But for some students that they may have more specialized needs and may need staff with a certain expertise, just specifically given our size, there's only some things that we really do need to send students out in terms of some students benefit from being in a school maybe with only 20 other students, and, that they have that kind of specialized needs, that that's better for them.
Like an extreme example might be the Perkins School for the Deaf and Blind, right? So they couldn't meet that student's needs here, so that would be the kind of need where an out-of-district placement makes sense.
And I think over a decade ago, we had over 20, maybe as many as 26 out-of-district placements. So you've worked hard over a long time during your tenure here.
Yeah, when I first started, we were, and that was 12 years ago, we were around the 30, like a little around like 30, 35 number consistently, and now we've been ranging between 10 and 15, and I feel that will probably be our number. In terms of that, there will be some students that just have some very specialized needs. And then there's also some logistics of when students come to us, and some students, they're in out-of-district placements and we're responsible for them, but it's because they moved here. So their programming has already been set, and sometimes we'll bring those students back and have them come here, but sometimes it makes sense for them to stay where they are. So there's a number of different factors that influence that.
Great, thank you.
Any questions?
Well, yeah, I just was thinking when you said about the 13 out-of-district placements, I mean, our population is like 1,300, 1,500 around there, so
Yeah.
we were talking about like 1% of the total student population. What are the numbers of students that are on IEPs and 504s?
So for special education, for the October 1st, it was 251, and that was around 17, closer to 18. We just started tracking our numbers, like for the state, in terms of our students on 504 plans, and that range is like, it's actually like 50 and 90. Like,
Okay.
for some reason I have 50 in my head and 90 in my head, and I know that can't be right. So in terms of the
Less than
number of
100.
students, so in terms of supporting students, I would say pretty much that it's around like low 300 in terms
Okay.
of the students who have either an IEP, or a 504 plan altogether. Now, what a 504 plan is that's another federal law, and that supports students also with disabilities. But they don't have the needs to meet and get an IEP, but they do have needs that they need certain federal protections and state protections, and that we're required to follow their plan, and often the plan consists of specific accommodations that we're required to follow and implement in order for them to be successful. If you think about the difference between a 504 and an IEP, so 504 is something that you could say like it levels the playing field, so that would be something like a ramp that students, it's very simple, it's more complicated. You can get into the front door of a building because we have a ramp. That's leveling the playing field for a student. Where special education referred to it as changing the game, that we're actually modifying things specifically for that student, and they have more specialized programming in terms of differentiating between the two.
Like a severe allergy. An
Might be
anaphylactic
somebody-
allergy, like a 504. The
Right.
student's learning needs are typical learning
Right.
needs, but they can't be exposed to peanut butter.
Right. So some students have it for medical reasons, but then we also have some students who do have learning needs, and it's that we have to make sure that they're in a classroom with information posted on the board, and they get access to class notes, and they get extra time for testing. But that levels the playing field for them, that extra time to test, but they don't get a different test. They just get more time to take the test because the nature of their needs, they'll be able to perform better if they had those accommodations, the difference between. Where students on IEP, special education, they have these accommodations, but then they also have what would be modifications, so maybe to their curriculum content, to how we teach them, or how we assess them. So that's what differentiates the 504 from the IEP.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
Can you say a little bit about how the trends we're facing in Maynard match up against or don't against our regional and state trends?
I think the trend is what everybody's seeing. I think one of the things specifically in terms of the students coming into preschool, we recently just got a report. We're part of an early intervention catchment, and looking at the numbers of our students in early intervention proportionally to the number of students in school and compared to our catchment area, that other than one other district, we're disproportionately high So right now, we do have a number of students in early intervention that's higher than some of the surrounding communities. So, that is important for us to think about, because we know who our population of students are right now in preschool, but this is kind of saying, right, we've seen an increase in need, that increase may continue in terms of these students with autism spectrum disorders. And see the numbers, it was, 1 in 100, now it's 1 in 68. So that's changing everywhere in terms of the identification of students. But looking at our numbers, we are disproportionately high in terms of the number of students. And everybody's high, but I feel that we're a little bit higher if you look at our numbers. We have to identify students in that group. And so I think that's something for us to consider in terms of our planning. And students with significant mental health issues, we're seeing that part of one of our collaborative groups, we're getting together, and all of us are seeing this increase in students with very significant mental health issues. I think everybody's seeing an increase in students with social emotional needs and issues. For example, the CPAC put together a presentation for a presenter that talked about anxiety, and they had one of the highest, I think, attendance at any of their presentations ever. So to me, that's a huge thing, that parents are coming because they're seeing a workshop and that they want, which, I mean, I think we have like 90-something people. Yeah, which is huge for CPAC. So, I'm seeing that as a trend in the whole field. I think the number of students with anxiety, they're saying right now that have been identified is like 24% of children have like identified anxiety. But I think, so that's everywhere. So that's something that we need to think about. But I also think the issue that we have to be very mindful of the students with the more significant mental health issues that result in hospitalizations, and that they need specialized care in order for us to meet their needs. And I think that is a growing trend everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm Jen O'Leary, and I'm the chair of the CPAC, and I'm going to introduce you to my fellow cohorts in a moment. So we have most of the board here tonight, but we had 2 board members that weren't able to make it due to work conflict and wonderful illness. So one of the things that I actually just want to make a note that this is the first time ever that the CPAC has made a presentation to the school committee. So I want to thank Bob and Jill for making this happen, and this all came out of some work that we did in the spring, and I'll get you into that. So we are very excited to be here. The reason that we have a CPAC stands for Special Education Parent Advisory Council. And the reason that we have one is because Massachusetts law says we must. I just put for your perusal later some of the detail of the law, but it basically says every school committee should have one of those. So this law is kind of what differentiates a CPAC from a PTO or any other parent-run organization, because we're actually state mandated, and so that's what we do. One of the things that Jill and I often talk about too, it's great that something is state mandated and we adhere to that, but really what it is best practice and what we should be doing anyway, and it's good for everyone. So we have some specific things that we're supposed to do, like meet with school officials regularly and participate in planning and development. And so there's a lot of information on these slides. I'm not going to go over in detail each one. Really, we put the packet together for you guys so you would have some information that you could go back to if you needed to. And at the back of your packet is some biography information and pictures of the CPAC board in case you wanted that information for later as well. We just tried to keep it all in one place for you. But I wanted to put this information about the guidance from the Department of Ed because CPACs have been around for a while, but there was a lot of push from parents and CPACs to like, okay, well, we want to do this. Can we do this? Our town said no. What do we do? So the Department of Ed really needed to provide some guidance to CPACs and schools on how to make a good CPAC and what would be appropriate functioning. And so they identified, a lot of different things, but primarily it's all about collaboration. Collaboration with the superintendent, school committee, and the director of special education. And then like any other organization, here's some good things to do. Why don't you have a mission? Why don't you have, bylaws and things like that? And one of the biggest things for us is developing a system of practice for communicating to the parents about the PAC, but also other important constituencies in the town, like the PTO or the school committee or the Board of Selectmen and such. And so they go on to produce some other great ideas. The best thing to do is to tap the strength of the parent-school collaboration, which we have really been working on. Making the PAC visible, doing needs assessments, which would be parent surveys, creating a spin-off group, such as parent support, and assisting the district in conducting the annual required training. And when I was preparing this presentation, the thing that I was most happy about is that we're actually really doing all of these things. Our CPAC and Maynard and our district are doing all these wonderful things that the state really feels like would make an effective PAC. So that was really exciting. And just to comment on the annual required training, every school district is required to have a class for parents about their basic rights in special education, and that's the annual training that they recommend the CPAC do. And so we do that every year, and we actually collaborate with a couple of other towns to do that, Sudbury and Acton. And that presentation is actually on Monday night in Sudbury. We hosted last year, so it's Sudbury's turn to host. Yes, it is going to be at the Curtis Middle School. I don't really know where that is.
It's in my blog. The address was in my last week's
great.
blog, and it'll be in this week's.
Pratt's Mill Road. I'll be GPSing it on Monday night. And so just wanted to show you who we are and why we do what we do. We are parent volunteers, and we do this on our own time. We do tend to have a little bit more expertise about special ed because our children are in special ed, so we've kind of had to learn. So we kind of lend our expertise, and I'm just going to have the other board members introduce themselves and show you which family is theirs. But mine's the O'Leary family. I have 3 kids. Caitlin, who's turning 14 this weekend, and she had an awesome Mystique outfit that people in downtown trick-or-treat were very excited about. And my son Connor is in the middle. He is 9, and he receives special education. And he was a lucky guy that got great early intervention from ages 0 to 3, and then came into the public school, and he's been doing fantastic. He's in 3rd grade. And Melissa is my 11-year-old, and she was identified a little bit later. She is also on the autism spectrum. Her presentation is quite different than my son's, and she's been a little bit not as straightforward, a little bit more challenging, a little bit more complicated, but she's doing really well. And I really have to commend Jill. I've been doing this for about 7 years now. I was actually elected chair before my first child on special ed was actually in the school. So I've been doing this for 7 years. And so I'm going to let my cohorts introduce themselves.
Okay. I'm Jess O'Toole. I'm the CPAC secretary. You can see my 3 boys up there. Eli is in 3rd grade. He is on the autism spectrum. He receives special ed services, primarily social, behavioral, some academic. Simon is in 1st grade. He also is on the autism spectrum and receives social and behavioral support. And then my little guy Owen is in the preschool. He's 4. He actually has a genetic syndrome called Angelman syndrome. So he has significant challenges, a profound communication impairment. He has an iPad that he's using to learn to communicate. He also has motor challenges, but he's awesome. the Monster March today, and he did multiple than So.
I'm Michelle Grace, and that's my family there, my husband Rob and our son Dimitri. And we adopted Dimitri from Russia when he was 14 months of age, and he's now almost 9. He's in 3rd grade in Mrs. Teddy's class. And I think one of the biggest testimonies is he started at the Green Meadow Preschool right on his 3rd birthday, didn't even give him a day off on his birthday, nonverbal. He was nonverbal probably until midway through kindergarten. I had people handing me notices about assistive technology and everything. And now Jess can tell you from after school, he's very chatty, he makes his own points, and we are so grateful to everybody and, just the Green Meadow Special Education services he's received. And he receives a host of services. He still has a lot to work on, a lot to do, but he's making progress in every area day by day. And, we're really grateful. And that's why we need this.
Hi, I'm Jen Scott. I have 2 children, as you can see there. I have a husband too, but he took the picture. So the youngest, Adelaide, she's 3.5. She's in preschool at Green Meadow. My oldest son is almost 7, and he's in 1st grade also at Green Meadow. And I have a unique perspective from other members of the CPAC because I'm a transplant. So my son had a 1.5 years of special education in the Somerville School District. And I was really excited and pumped up and thought, this is a really great program. And then I called Kate Markowitz before he moved here just to say, my son has autism, has an IEP, let's meet up before. And when I showed up here and gave her a copy of my IEP, she looked at it and said, where's the rest of it? I said, what do you mean, where's the rest of it? So his IEP in Somerville was 1.5 pages long, and I had never even heard of what a CPAC was. And then I moved here, and now his IEP is 7 to 8 pages long, and I'm the public outreach coordinator for the CPAC. He was basically nonverbal when we moved here. He had less than 150 words and couldn't put together more than 2 words to form a sentence. And now, like Dimitri, can't go in the shop. So Green Meadow is fantastic, Maynard is fantastic, and thank you.
And so we have 2 remaining members of the board that weren't able to make it tonight. Michelle Masala, she is the Green Meadow parent representative. And she's actually, you'll see in her bio, she's actually also a special educator in Framingham. So it's really nice to have someone with that type of expertise on our board. And then Maribel Ruda is our high school parent representative. And I'm sure you're all familiar with her son, Esteban. And so she brings a whole breadth and wealth of knowledge to that. And so the last thing I kind of really wanted to go through is some of our accomplishments and goals. And I leave them together because a lot of our accomplishments used to be goals or are ongoing goals that we've accomplished and that we want to keep going. And I'm going to touch briefly on these because they are really important. One of the things the state says is you should do needs assessments. Well, we're doing that. We've done 2 of those in the last couple of years. And we haven't gotten all the data that we want, but we're getting better at it, and you don't get better at it unless you try. And so that's been really great. We've had our first focus groups where we sat down at a table and let parents be able to just talk with Jill and just talk about what their challenges and issues and wishes and hopes for changes are. And then we've been able to get some really great guest speakers, mostly through collaborating in the community. The last couple of years I've reached out to the PTOs and the Maynard Family Association, and everybody has been very willing to pitch in and get some really great guest speakers because you don't get Dr. Ross Green in your town or West Dominican unless you can pay them. So we've been really fortunate that way. So we've been really working on that collaboration and bringing it in a whole community. The other thing that's great is a lot of the guest speakers that we bring in that the other organizations are willing to collaborate with is topics that affect all parents and all kids. For example, you don't have to be on an IEP or have a disability to have anxiety that you could use some tips and help with. And same with social skills and problem solving. So that's been a really nice collaboration. We've also tried to do additional giving back by donating some treats to the parent-teacher luncheons that they have at the end of the year to celebrate all the teachers. We do volunteer at different events. We've made donations to some of the PTOs when they've done their fundraisers, the auctions, etc. And I've actually personally been doing some consulting to the Boys and Girls Club as they're trying to make their environment and programming more inclusive for all kids. One of the things that I would have to say in the last 7 years that I'm especially proud of is that we hold 2 annual socials for families in the year, and we have been very graciously supported by Jill and Bob to do these. And the socials, initially, what I wanted to do is be able to allow some parents to come and meet other parents in a non-intimidating way. Coming to listen to an educator talk and teach you things about your kids, what they may be challenging with or what you need to do at home to make things work better for you, that can be really intimidating to some parents. But if you can bring them to a social where you can just meet people and say hi and start to get to know people, it's a way to bring people in. The great benefit that we found through the socials is that there are a lot of kids, when you have some challenges or disability, you don't really get invited to all the parties anymore once you get past preschool. And that's if you got invited in the first place. So being able to have these kids have a place where they can go to a party, where they get to do some crafts and have a nice prize when they go home, has been really beneficial. And I've had many parents say to me that this is the only thing that they can go do with their kids because they know all the other parents are going to understand whatever behaviors the kids may have there. So that's been a really, really wonderful benefit that we've been able to provide. And we have been able to get more parents involved through that. So I'm very proud of those. Yes, and the Best Buddies from the high school, we've collaborated with them. They come in and they help the kids basically do the crafts. They help us with setup and cleanup, and so that's been a really nice partnership as well. So we have some great growing visibility and membership, and we have, although it continues to be a goal, we have done accomplished quite a bit in improving communication to parents. Each year we have Jill come to a CPAC meeting and give us a kind of a state of the state on special ed in Maynard. Some of it is a lot of the information that she just presented to you because most parents don't know all the ins and outs of special ed because it's really very complicated. But understanding the basis is really helpful. But then she'll go into a lot of details about what we're doing, what professional development's going on, and that's really helpful for parents. And that was something that had never really been done before. So that's a step in the right direction. This year at Green Meadow has been a little bit challenging because there's been a lot of staff turnover at the very beginning of the year. And I am so happy to report that parents have been notified as fast as possible about these staff changes, because what happens with when a child is on an IEP, that means services are impacted when staff changes. And then when you have children who have social issues, anytime you change a staff person, that brings another whole set of complication for that child who is very attached to another person, doesn't do well with new people, does a lot of testing, and then that impacts how they can continue on their education. And just really happy with the communication that's been so far this year with letting parents know what's going on, which is really great. And then the CPAC has done quite a bit to try to get our name a little bit out there more as well. We have a Yahoo group, which we have probably somewhere around 70 people on, and we post all kinds of great things, certainly our meetings. We have a Facebook page. We advertise in all the school newsletters. And for the last, I don't know how long, but for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been able to put all our notices in the superintendent notes. And none of those things were done before. So those are all steps in the right direction to get more parents to feel comfortable. What they say about marketing, you need to see the same ad however many times. So we just try to be out there. And one initiative we have is to create a quarterly newsletter that we would deliver through email. And it would be, again, a collaboration through the CPAC and through student services to kind of give parents, additional information, very short articles. One of the ideas I had after learning a little bit more about this great special educator at the Fowler School, Marcy Lohman, is what does inclusion mean to me? And having an educator talk about what does that mean, what does it look like, what do I think about inclusion? And really getting not only the parents, but other educators thinking about what inclusion means. We have been consistently having monthly leadership meetings with Bob and Jill to talk about some of our goals. We participated in a collaborative meeting called the Apple Institute, which is put on by the Federation for Children with Special Needs. And Jill, myself, Jessica, and Michelle, we spent 3 days in all-day conferences collaborating and working on coming up with an agreed action plan, agreed upon action plan. So that's been really great. And this year, we are currently working on trying to get a support group going for parents, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later after we're done here. So things are really moving. And we have some additional things that we'd like to do. We'd like to get into fundraising. Because we're an extension of the school committee, we have some of the same limitations that schools have in fundraising, so we have to find some creative ways to do that. We want to continue to create parent resources for parents, and provide some additional information on the special ed website, so that parents can go and look and find out, okay, well, my kid's going into 7th grade next year. Is there a particular program that they have for 7th graders that might fit, that type of stuff. And so there's lots of different ways that CPAC can be helpful to student services and special education in the school committee, and we wanted to let you know that we're here. If you have questions about students on IEPs or what's going on with basic rights, we are here to help you, and we look forward to continue to collaborate.
Excuse me, are there any questions for?
One question I have, one part of our budget last year was including an additional member in student services to increase communication. How's that going?
We haven't hired them yet.
Okay.
So we also haven't hired the staff, because with the transition to the Fowler, there's just been, that took most of our summer, just getting that, and we're hiring the basic staff to provide services. So, and now that we're transitioning to Fowler, it doesn't make sense to set up an office at Coolidge, so hopefully in Christmas, we're going to be here at Fowler, the whole administration building, and we'll start hiring those positions. So we're not there yet.
So we're looking more at like a January start?
Yeah.
Or something. Okay.
Which would be extremely helpful, especially I saw the extra website stuff would be wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what people do. I got a call from a parent today. She found my information from going to the website. So parents really do kind of rely on the website to get information. So it'd be really great to distribute that way.
Nancy, your question?
I know that I would like to especially thank the CPAC, because without them, I wouldn't have had an opportunity to listen to Dr. Russ Ray or to Jessica. Just being able to be part of that workshop with the two of them, because I was able to have my repertoire in additional classrooms. So I appreciate it very much.
Okay, I'm glad. That's exactly why we do what we do. Enrich everybody. We're all in the same boat together.
Yeah, that's great. I have just one last kind of question, just sort of a general thing, but something that you said about having socials for the students because they might not be invited to parties in the normal social setting. But I guess the question is that what I have seen at the high school through the Best Buddies program and everything are students who are very supportive of students. But I can understand or can imagine that younger students, in some cases, kids can be very cruel.
Yep.
And I know that in some social settings, it's a thing where you can't make somebody like somebody. But would you view that there is any problems with kids just being mean and because of the legal term, I hate to use it, but bullying, but that kind of, negative behavior to special ed students?
It's historically known that special ed students have the bullseye on their head. Yeah. Especially when you're talking about kids with either severe anxiety or autism or some type of social disorder. They just don't fit in the same way. My oldest daughter now, she just wants to blend in. She doesn't want to be different. And when you're younger, it's, in the really younger ages, it's okay to be a little bit different. But there is this period of time where you just want to blend in with everybody else. And when you don't, there is a bit of a bullseye on your head. Bullying isn't something that people specifically talk to me about at the CPAC. I've certainly talked to other, parents that have had some challenges here and there. But the Best Buddies is fantastic, but my goal, a long-term goal would be to be starting that at much younger ages. Because my son and some of our kids that are a lot younger have had the benefit of always being in an integrated classroom, meaning typical students and non-typical students. And a lot of effort it goes into teaching the typical students how to interact with the non-typical and vice versa. And so they're learning that in the moment on a regular basis. But it needs to be fostered a little bit more, so in a way similar to Best Buddies that's a little bit more structured to kind of keep it going. Because, you know, my son in particular, you know, the younger he was, it was harder to see his disability, but the older he gets, the more visible it is because he doesn't interact the same way his peers do. And it's in those places where the gap starts to widen and some more structure around that. I don't know exactly how you get to doing Best Buddies in the elementary grades, but you know, that would be a goal, is to start some of this support and peer structure early.
What age does it start at now?
We have it that it starts in 8th grade.
Okay.
There are a few schools large schools that have middle school programs, but for the most part, Best Buddies itself is a high school program. But in other schools address the more facilitated social issues in different ways. You know, speaking to what Jen's talking about before, in terms of initiatives I put up that we're focusing on social skills and social thinking, and you know, that's an important piece. So you know, so much of what we focus on with students is around academics, but really we need to put the social skills and social thinking is understanding other people's perspectives and engaging with people within the context of everything changing. And you know, that we want to put that much emphasis on that as we do with academics as well, so that we're slowly building in additional trainings for staff and bringing in more resources around that, so that we can empower students and have everybody understand the importance of those social skills and working with students to facilitate those social skills. And then too often the focus is on math and reading, which is important, but this is important as well. So this is really a new initiative with us, and this is really pushing this forward. But you know, the more we do it, I think the more we see the need to do it even more. You know, in terms of skill development for everybody.
And it's interesting because sometimes with my son, who's always gotten social skills, you can see him with a typical student, he's got way better social skills in a lot of areas because he's being very specifically taught. And so it's a really, really helpful thing.
I was just going to say, as part of sort of IP, you know, the team development, one of the areas we do talk about is any concerns, the one-on-one bullying initiatives, you know, and it's great that I can, you know, voice them and driving concerns. Are there any situations that the team should know about? And, you know, I just always felt free to email my son's teacher if there's anything I have to say. I'm just so grateful for the teachers because they really, my son can probably see the picture in years of headphones, and it's actually just become this thing. They're like, what's he listening to? And, you know, it's just who he is, and I think the teachers do a really great job of fostering such a great community in the classrooms that, you know, they know he's different, they get it, but they care about him. And, you know, one day he came in late, they were all like, hi, Dimitri, and I was in tears because this is in his class this year, and Anne's just done such a great job of, you know, getting everybody on board with, okay, here he is, and he's different, and he can be disruptive and everything at times, but so hats off to our teachers at Green Meadow.
And about the initiative with teaching the social skills, the other thing that, again, it's that marketing thing. You need to keep seeing it over and over and over again. And the great thing is they keep bringing back the same people who do all the grades, from the youngest to the oldest. And so all the students and all the educators are all getting the same language. And that's really important, believe it or not. Especially when you're talking about kids with social issues.
Yeah.
I was trying to teach my daughter math and I said minus, and she didn't know what I was talking about because she was taught to take away. So using the same language is actually really, really important, and that is a commitment that our district has made, realizing that getting along in life with just good social skills is pretty important.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad to see a number of changes that we've made. I think the joint presentation is fantastic. I'm glad we're really doing that because you and I had some conversations last year about the need and importance of this, and the fact that you're having a leadership meetings regularly, I think that's a fantastic step forward. So it's just kind of exciting to see. It sounds like we're off to a good start, and we'll look forward in January to filling that staff position, and we're into budget season. So I'm sure we'll have more conversations then. That touches everybody.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you as well for both of you. It's really helpful for me as I get up to speed on some of the things going on at the schools, the good and the bad, the challenges and the strengths. I just really appreciate it. So thank you for all the time. It's clear you put a lot of time into this, and you both care deeply, as well as the rest of the board. So thank you. That's sincere.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
All right, next item on the agenda is FY16 budget, which I think we're going to be putting on the agenda just constantly for every meeting. It just gives us the opportunity that we can discuss it, and if we need to, we could make any decisions on, especially as we go into having to approve a budget for submission to the Board of Selectmen. Bob, do we have any updates?
We really don't have any updates at this time. I know the Budget Subcommittee has been talking about getting together. We haven't, but we will. And I know that we're awaiting the town administrator's guidance. That's always an important beginning phase for us. And I know that we talked about inviting FinCom to talk some more about the presentation we saw regarding the Capital Planning Committee. So I think that we'll probably want to get the FinCom to come soon to share with us their thoughts on that as well. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say, related to that, I know that we've had some questions concerning the whole capital planning, but maybe just the whole budget process on it. So I think the plans are to invite Peter Campbell for the next meeting. Looking at the agenda for tonight's meeting, it just looked like it was kind of full.
Yeah.
And just, and also with having a special town meeting this week, is just figure, okay, he's already been out to one meeting tonight, this week and stuff, to let him go to the next one. So as long as we can arrange him to come, but I think maybe having some questions ahead of time to send to him, so that at least he can, look things up if need be or whatever, so that we could maybe, he'd be prepared for what sort of questions we have for him.
So I think one thing to talk about is the capital planning, because how much we set aside for capital planning, what percentages we're talking about in terms of stabilization, et cetera, affect operating budgets. And I appreciate people looking long-term and thinking about long-term financial stability. I think that's important. But I think that needs to be balanced, again, maintaining services. So I know that's one thing I would like to talk about. And then another, and I don't know to what extent FinCom plays a role in it, but I think Peter's also pretty astute, but forecasting revenue might be something, because that also seems to really drive operating budgets. And I know our free cash seems like it's been within the realm of possibly where it should be, but I'd just be a little bit curious some of those processes and whatever ways we can get in early. I don't know how much input we have on those conversations, but that's sort of some of the things I'm thinking about.
I'd like to also understand, so as of the last town meeting on Monday night, they put another chunk of money, so now they've got $2 million set aside in capital reserves, for which we originally did that to sort of start saving up for a fire station someday. But I also understand that they're tabling the idea of putting a fire station committee together. So I'd like to understand the idea of taking out of the operating budget for capital costs versus the $2 million that we've sunk into capital planning. So just want to, really, to me, it's going to all come down to the budget message and what we have to look at for cuts, and hopefully not many, but that's a whole ball of wax I want to understand. We're putting $2 million away, but we're not actually going to kick off a fire station committee. It's not necessarily a priority. And I don't want to make a ton of assumptions, but that's what I'm hearing. Are we putting money away, or are we taking money out of the operating budget? Are we doing both? Are we maintaining services and putting too much in the rainy day fund? It's some good questions to understand.
It's good to save.
Oh, sure.
But if like on your own household budget,
right,
putting a lot of money aside and living on peanut butter and jelly isn't a good plan.
Right. Well, and we also have just a regular stabilization fund. So there's stabilization, which is our rainy day fund. We can go into this more later, but we are literally
there's the
also
capital stabilization.
Now we're putting capital, which I agree with.
Right.
But then I really have some concerns about taking away from our operating budget if we can't maintain services. So Again, I'll understand that more as we get the numbers from the town and what we have to look at on our end, but some concerns I have, and I'd like FinCom to understand that we've got concerns.
All right. So any further discussion on the budget? Okay. Next, sort of related, is foreign exchange funds.
So we're trying to be prudent with our funds as well. We had a pretty good discussion at the last school committee meeting, and there is a revised version in your packet of some of what we talked about. The school committee recommended that we develop like 4 pots of money in regards to this fund, with general descriptions of how the money would be allocated. So I took that advice and I developed this attached fiscal year 15 foreign exchange funds protocol. The 4 pots of money recommended were a reserve fund, a professional development fund, a program development fund, and an administrative discretionary fund. It's a little different than the last time because since we met last time, we realized we're trying to, this is our first year really of the expansion of the foreign exchange program. We're trying to make sure it's successful. We want to make sure the students are successful. Many of the students came over with the desire to get a United States diploma from Maynard High School. And in order to do so, we set clear expectations that they would have to pass the MCAS and all the other things that, that a high school student at Maynard would have to do. It's the same requirements. One of the challenges that I'm learning with retail as well is content vocabulary. So because of the way the 10th grade general education MCAS is set up, they can have 2 opportunities to pass that. But in order for the science requirement, there's only 1 opportunity for them to pass a biology test. And as we all know, for those of us who took biology, biology is very content vocabulary specific. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for a general ed student, let alone for a student who English is a second language. So one of the things that Chuck recommended was that we use some of that administrative discretionary funds to provide extra tutoring in biology for those foreign exchange students who are planning on getting a diploma and are planning on taking that MCAS, the biology MCAS. So I think that kind of makes sense. It's a perfect use of those funds to help the students who came here and brought those funds with them. And so I just wanted to add that because we hadn't talked about how we would provide tutoring or any other services for students. I mean, we have talked about providing extra ELL services at the high school, but this is specifically for that biology test, which could be a challenge for anybody, really.
Will that tutoring be open up to other Maynard students who may have an interest, or will it be only for the international students?
I think our thought was right now it would be specifically for those students, but I'm always open to opening it up too. No, the reality is though, there's a reason why. Because it's a 10th grade biology MCAS. So they're coming at seniors behind the 8 ball. They didn't have a 10th grade chance, they didn't have the 11th grade chance, they only have 2 chances in their senior year to pass MCAS. Our students have already passed it, for the most part. Our seniors have all passed the
Oh, so they're not taking the MCAS?
They're not even taking this, but these students are catching up because they didn't have the opportunities because they were only here for 1 year. They're not here for their whole high school career to meet all of the mass requirements.
But if we had any students who were taking the MCAS, I understand with tutoring, there's also a student
ratio,
teacher ratio or whatever, but if you were to take a look at it and
absolutely,
you had a few extra seats and you had
Why
a
wouldn't
couple
we?
of students who would benefit, I mean, I know that's the kind of thing we try to leverage, but
yeah,
just pointing it out.
No, we've always tried to see how we can leverage and utilize, maximize our resources. So I can talk to Principal Karajanis about that.
Oh, they are? Well, it's already ahead of me.
I mean, they have assigned kids to it,
Oh.
but it's open, the teacher lets anybody,
Oh, okay.
There you go.
but it's just getting them to admit that they need to.
That'll be a lifelong barrier. I really don't know, like, admitting we need help. And the motivational speaker, we had also talked about, I realize that, part of the purpose in setting up the discretionary fund is to let, those who know the students well to make decisions here, but we talked about with the motivational speaker, finding either other funding or supportive funding that other people were interested in that sort of thing and not taking it all. So we just want to encourage.
Well, that particular motivational speaker, I think Kevin is working at the time, the high school PTO and somebody else mentioned they might be able to chip in on it.
Okay.
But there are a lot of really good opportunities. So I was at the MassQ convention with with Charles Gabron, the interim curriculum director, and Peter Martin, our technology director, and Jack Colombo, our new technology person. And the keynote speaker, they did like TED Talks as keynote speakers. The keynote speaker was a young lady who was 17 years old from, I want to say Hopkinton High School, who was so articulate. What she talked about was, as part of her senior project, she looked at self-image media, specifically social media, self-image for young women, and how it impacts young women. And she did a brilliant speech on how social media can be used for good and can be used for bad. And they have an iPad initiative, and she talked about how, as she was in her school journey, how difficult it was in some ways for her, but how she's now turned it around and literally created her own website. She's helping students, she's counseling students, getting counseling for students too, having support groups, and she's doing speeches all around the state. So someone like that would be, to have a student talk about those sort of issues for our students, you know, that might be a really special thing if we had an opportunity and we had the money. I mean, you know, those are the kind of things that sometimes you can't plan for, but you see it and you just know it's good and it's right for kids. So it might not just be that specific one we talked about. There are other opportunities where, you know, we will try to fundraise and do other ways of doing it, but I just, sometimes something's so powerful and so important, a message is so important, and I can't even articulate it as well as this young lady did. She did such a good job, but it was so important that, you know, those are the kind of messages, especially for a high school that has an iPad initiative, and we, you know, we're constantly trying to teach digital responsibility. Her message was, you know, it's for good and for bad, but use it for good because there's all the positives, and she clearly articulated that as well. So those are the kind of things that, you know, sometimes you might want to just be able to bring it in if you can.
Right.
And I got her card. She was walking around with her parents, and she had a card. I said, "Can I talk to you?" Because that was really good. So she might be somebody I might want to bring in.
Okay. Just looking over the percentages, the breakdown, I think it's a good plan because we're trying to bank 2/3 of it, which I think is very prudent.
That was Pete's idea.
Yeah, it allows a little discretionary that if we need, you know, some money rather than take it from something that actually is affecting the current program, it is a little reserve for it and supporting the program so that the students who are the foreign exchange students hopefully will have a very positive experience and will tell brothers, sisters, friends, and we can maintain this program going on in the future as successful as it has started off with. So, I mean, I think if we just say to use this as a model to go forward for future years, I mean, I'm be very happy with that. Are there any comments?
No, should we approve this, or does it require approval?
I don't think it really needs, I mean, we don't have any other kind of policy dictating anything for the circuit breaker or for school choice. But I think it's just very good that we have an outline, sort of a guidance from the business manager on how these monies will be spent.
Well, and I think we could update, every year, this could be a different number. We could only have 2 students next year. Hopefully, we're going to have another 17. So it's going to be a totally different scenario, and every year, you're going to want to know what's going on, so we would be presenting it to you on an annual basis, I think. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Looks good.
And maybe at the end of the year too, just an accounting, like, because some things, just be nice to know, like, how did it actually shake out
Oh, yeah.
at the end. I think that looks good.
Absolutely.
Thank
That
you.
makes sense.
Okay, next on the agenda, superintendent's goals.
So, at our last meeting, I sent out the professional practice and student learning goal, and then we had discussions on the district-related goals, and I sent something out to you this week in regards to those. Trying to find them in my packet. So I don't know, I'm willing to take questions or recommendations or any ideas on those. Unfortunately, I'm having trouble finding them. But I'll just type down whatever you tell me and we'll add it or figure out what to do.
So on the professional practice goals, since
Yep.
we have gotten the DC report,
Yep.
if we could maybe put a date in for the 1 month, because I think we could probably plug in the 12/8 date.
I just talked about that earlier. We plan on December 18th, so we'll just make it December 18th.
Yeah, and so you're going to be working with the special education consolidated program review and the
Yep.
mid-cycle review. The results. Oh, okay, I was saying we were going to see the feed. So when is that CPR going on? Did that occur, or is that going on now?
Well, so it's a well, I'll let Jill speak to it. I have the best person to speak to it right now.
So we have the coordinated program review, and there's the full review, which is done every 6 years. And
Yeah.
This year is our mid-cycle.
Okay, so this is the third year.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a much smaller scale, but they'll be coming to us in March.
Oh, okay. We'll report to the dates that it's occurring, and then, so we'll get to take a look at the results and have a feedback session is what you mean by that point number 4, right? We'll look at the results and talk about that?
Yes,
Okay.
in March.
Well, no, because they're coming in
Oh.
March, so
Yes.
a year from March.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll keep you posted after their visit in March.
Well, and if you recall, the last time when
Yeah.
we went through the full cycle, I did give you updates, because, a lot like the district
Yeah.
review, they'll do an exit interview and tell us generally what they found.
Right, right.
And then, so I can give you updates as to where we are, where we think we are, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing, too.
Yeah.
So actually, really wouldn't be, I'm just assuming that if they're coming in March to do it, we're not going to have a report back until many months later.
Maybe not.
But you would have maybe feedback from the review,
As opposed to a report.
whereas as opposed to, or results.
Could we follow a similar program to what we're doing with the DC report, where once the final report is in, that gets forwarded, and then
Of course.
we have, a conversation about it at the school committee level to just hear about, like, what are your reactions, what are your thoughts, how are we going to respond to, let's celebrate the commendations, and how are we going to respond to the areas that they've pointed out. So maybe if we could just, build on that with a point 5 that says, and I think you've got a nice template above, before the final draft, and within 1 month of receiving it, we'll have a conversation. Does that sound okay?
Yep, sounds great.
And with the understanding that that might have to slide on to the FY15 goals.
Right.
Right? I mean,
A lot of
that's-
goals overlap.
Yeah, if that's what we have to do, then. That's all I had on the professional practice. Anybody else?
Okay, on the student learning goal, any further comments, Bob?
No, although Amy was able to come by, and I introduced her to our
Karen Kilmartin?
Karen Kilmartin, the Title IIA Professional Development, Literacy Coach for Professional Development. And one of the things I was really proud of, Amy, when she was talking to us, she talked a lot about, first of all, just to give you a little background about her, we brought her in, last year she literally volunteered her services, it was her first year of retirement, and she had history with Maynard in that her grandchildren attended our schools, and she likes Maynard a lot, she lives in a neighboring community. And so she just volunteered. She just came up to us and said, I'd like to help out. I have a lot of expertise because I've worked at the Department of Ed, I've worked in the Lowell Public Schools, I've been a central office curriculum leader in my career, and I have a lot to offer. And one of the things she shared with us was that, in fact, in her leadership role in Lowell, after 3 years of working with teachers in a school that was a level 3 school, they became a level 1 school, and then after she left, they continued to be a level 1 school. So the things that she implemented had a profound impact on those schools. So I was like, wow, this lady's awesome. It's pretty exciting. We need to bring her as a consultant. Enough of this volunteering stuff, we want to make sure she sticks around. So this year, she's sticking around, and she shared with Amy, because Amy's been interested in the data portion of it, and so I want, you had the opportunity to come by. And one of the things that made me very happy was that she shared with us that last year, in her work last year, what she observed was our staff at Fowler, what she accomplished in 3 years in one school, in Lowell, she felt like our district did in 1 year. Now, what that says is our teachers are working really hard. and they're moving at a very fast pace. And I just want to acknowledge that, and especially having somebody with such expertise to come in and identify that, but also to help them and provide them with, the structure they need to make that happen. So I'm really excited when you see all those key actions around the data. I think you're going to be having more curricular updates at the school committee level. We're hoping, I think it's the December 4th meeting, to have Don and Mark Sinopoli and a few others come and give you a presentation on some of the data. And she talked with us, Amy, about really getting excited for possibly a February presentation once they have 2 cycles of the STAR data. And she felt like this district has been moving in the right direction and making a lot of right decisions as far as the data we had before STAR, including STAR data now, and now including the cycle of the ORID and the cycle of development that she's brought into our district. So it was really an exciting meeting for me, but most importantly, it validated that our teachers are working like 3 times as fast as other teachers, and I just think that needs to be acknowledged, how hard our teachers work.
Well, that's great.
I don't know if that's what you got out of it, but that's what I got out of it.
Yeah. Well, listening to her is like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, she gave us a lot of information in a couple hours.
No, it was 1 hour. She timed us.
That's right.
She did.
She did. She had me use my timer.
She did. Yeah, but I have a couple questions about our student learning goals here, your student learning goals.
Yep.
So one is the multiple sources of data all list testing sources. And so I'm just sort of thinking about students and teachers and the interaction and the process of teaching. One thing that occurs to me is, does it include sort of measures or data other than just direct testing? And I'm thinking here of, specifically a teacher's knowledge of a student. So a student may say, well, the testing indicates that they need to be moved up into the next zone of proximal development. And the teacher's thinking, gosh, there's actually a lot going on for this student where being a leader in this group is really good for confidence or something. Or another student whose testing might show that they're to remain in a group, but say, this student actually understands it, but they're just a little bit slow, and maybe the timing of the test didn't work well, and so their judgment might be a little bit different. Is there an interplay between test results and teacher judgment?
Well, she did talk to us about triangulating information, and I think she did put that in there, but that's... I don't know if that's more qualitative and harder to measure than quantitative measures.
No, I know, and I know.
We tend to want to find.
You can't measure, but maybe this is a conversation, this is probably not a conversation around your goal, but just as I was looking at the goal, that was, I think, one thing I'm curious to hear about, because I think the testing and the data is really helpful, and I'm excited about a lot of possibilities, but I also want to be careful that if we become so data-driven that we lose some of teacher knowledge, instinct.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's stuff there that can't be
quantitatively gotten.
but is important. And so anyway, I'd like to continue talking about that. And then the next thing I was just curious about, we end with having the park data collected for the 2015 testing cycle, and I'm sure that this is something that we'll do. So I'll throw this out there. Maybe it should be part of your goals, maybe not. But just the school committee getting a report on the park, how did the implementation go? What did we learn from that? A report on the student data, even if it isn't something that will be used for us, but just sort of a whole reflection on how the whole park thing went, rather than just ending with the data collection, but putting a fifth step in there. That's the reflection on the whole experience as we learn as a district how to make this transition effectively.
Makes sense. And she did talk to us a lot about the correlation they're going to try to do with park data. So there's going to be a lot of information to share about that, because it is a hold harmless year, but it'll be interesting data and an interesting report and reflection to share with the school committee.
Yeah, and
she had shared that with us too.
Yeah, and one thing we need to think about is just how the bumps in the implementation, because the first year in the big transition, they're bound to be some rocks in the road.
Oh yeah, well that's why we volunteered to do it a year earlier than we had to,
great.
Which is I think a good thing, so that we learn the bumps of the road before anybody else does.
Yeah.
We want to learn.
I know.
We're a learning community.
So that's all I had on the student learning. If anybody else has any?
Okay. Bob, on the last one, on the district schools who are utilizing tenets of 21st century skill, one of your benchmarks is develop sister school pen pal programs with
Yeah.
foreign schools. I don't recall you mentioning that before.
So, Lauren Junta, who is one of our social studies teachers, she's wonderful and she's well-traveled. She and I have recently been talking about my trip to China and the schools that I visited, and we visited not only 2 high schools, but a middle school. And so they've actually been emailing me saying, can we do something with your intermediate school? And so I talked to Lauren, she's excited, so I'm pretty confident we're going to at least have a program with one of the Chinese schools, but she has some other resources too, so I'm really excited to see where she takes this.
Okay.
I just think it would be, it's really good for Fowler to establish their international identity. Green Meadow, we have a lot of things going on. High school, we have a lot of things going on. We have the Spanish immersion program and a lot of neat things, and we had Mike go to Guatemala. Was it Guatemala?
Ecuador.
Ecuador. And, he created some relationships there. We had some teachers, so communicating with the school there. So I want to see Fowler get some of these international ideas, and that's why I felt this was an important goal. But I'm excited because, again, it's another outstanding teacher doing incredible work who's working with me because she's excited about it.
Are there any further questions about Bob's goals?
What's WIDA? W-I-D-A?
So,
WIDA?
What page is that on?
That's
World-
under the
yeah,
strengthening
do you know
curriculum instruction.
what the acronym stands for, Nancy? World-class instruction intervention. It is going to be the test for retail. So I talked to you about the course that I'm taking and that many of our staff are taking and all the requirements around that. That's actually phase 1 of the retail initiative. Phase 2 is the transferring over to the WIDA, which is the type of test. They have the access test that helps us identify the skill levels of the students with ELLs. And that's a transition from, what was the old test called?
We used to do the ELO and the NEPA,
Thank you.
and now we're doing the access, and that's an additional test in addition to like MCAS the Park for the ELL students, so they get assessment every year. So the same way we monitor students with MCAS, we monitor the ELL students with their access scores and their progress for English proficiency. And then the WIDA is, Massachusetts recently adopted that. We're one of
22 states consortium.
States that are using this model, and it's basically the guidelines, the curriculum, the instructional philosophy, and the assessment piece that for ELL.
Okay.
So
Could
it's
you
a
just spell
3-year.
it out, or-
Yeah, we can, I'm,
Just say WIDA. Oh, okay. All right, well, that's just me. Yeah, there you go. It's all
You
right.
have the opportunity to go onto their website. It
Yeah.
really is an amazing website.
but I'll get more information as I learn more. I'm still in the class, so I'm still
Well,
learning too.
when I just read it, I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah,
It just
yeah.
said, to plan for
Education's
the
great
rest of the
practice.
You must not be doing that well in class if you don't even look at it.
Lots of acronyms in
They could have a
education.
test just on all those.
Opportunities for you to look at what's important.
Okay.
What strategies are being driven for students of foreign language who need to access English.
Okay.
So it's a great website to
Oh, neat.
to work with.
Oh, thank you. So then there's just the final one, which is the district goal. And the district goal, Bob, reads to me like you wrote it late at night. So I think maybe rather than me going through sort of thing by thing, maybe you just need to take another look at it.
Okay.
But because it just seems like point 3 just kind of ends. Develop like an online summer school program. You have and the development of our mass-based satellite program to increase. I guess to increase I found it a little confusing to read.
Okay.
And then
Like it was German grammar?
yeah, I think so. It might have been. Although I don't know German, so it just read like it needed another proofing. And then in terms of benchmarks for the 21st century skills, I know I was the one who had talked about some of the language offerings. You point 2, you have hire appropriate staff to increase language offerings. I think we need to do a number of things before, so you have like investigate opportunities to increase language opportunities under key actions, point 2. Sorry, I'm a little scattered here. So key actions, point 2, investigate opportunities. I think we also, so in my mind, that includes making some choices. Do we push language down earlier in the follower grades, or do we expand more options? Like, I think maybe we first need to figure out what is it that we're offering, and maybe look at some comparable districts and like what are some of the different ways in which to improve it, because I doubt with the next year's budget we'll be able to do everything. So I think we should have a sense of a couple of options. And then under the benchmarks in terms of higher, I'm just thinking something a little bit more budget oriented. I think we need to I think it's something that needs to be evaluated based upon the overall budget, to what extent it makes sense versus other options. I mean, I kind of hate to say this because I think that increasing world languages is really, really important. But as we've talked, I have some anxiety about next year, and so to put down just higher to me seems to create a goal that might be at odds with other things that we're doing.
Right, of course.
So anyway, I know you know what I'm trying to say, so find a way to maybe say that doesn't put your benchmark as something that we might not be able to do. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. So the investigate you just elaborate on what the investigate means. Certainly we should be looking at...
That's what you're
Yeah,
thinking.
we should be looking at, do we offer world languages so that kids have a little exposure to some French and Spanish? We actually have a multi-talented teacher who can teach both of that. Do we start that at an earlier grade? Do we start it at 8th grade? Those are the type of things that we're still exploring. I've been talking to Principal Mila,
Right.
working with Charles Cabran, who actually has a lot of experience in this area, and he also has a bigger picture understanding of what kind of language and how early they start in other districts around here. And so I'm working with those people to figure out what we need. And of course, I am always conscious of budget, and again, I was tired, so higher wasn't the appropriate word. It probably should have been figure out how to reallocate or sort resources to make this happen.
Develop an appropriate plan to.
Yeah.
Right.
To fulfill the key actions.
So I was
So if your
thinking
key
more
actions
reallocate than higher, but I was so tired I did write higher.
No, this read to me like you wrote it when you were tired.
Well, and an attainable benchmark is come up with a plan to make point 2 come to fruition, whether it's a one-year plan or a multi-year plan.
Right,
based on
right.
budgetary
I
constraints.
mean,
Exactly.
Thank you, that's what I'm trying to say.
The thing is that with the goals, for the superintendent's goals, I think we should be focused on the actual goal. The benchmarks are sort of suggested metrics, which can change, given the circumstances. And I mean, I wouldn't want to tie the evaluation to certain benchmarks that because of events and whatever. So I don't think we're really, even though we approved that,
Well, based on all this great advice, though, when we come back at the mid-evaluation, I can say I've revised this because, the
I think we're all
suggestions...
saying the same thing, 6
Yeah.
different ways.
Yeah.
so.
Yeah,
And
we're
Bob,
just all getting tired.
I think on the key actions that Amy pointed out, where it was sort of, just looked like text got moved around.
Yes.
I think really just to correct that would be, as you go through that line where you get to the second N, cross that out and put to increase, and then it would be the development of mass-based satellite program, period.
Yeah.
So I think text just got moved.
Yeah, it was a cut and paste issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that makes sense from it. So I guess the question is, do we want to vote on this tonight, or do we want to come back for a third time? I mean, personally, I think the goals are set, and we do have interaction with Bob over the course of the year on them. So I'd like to get something crystallized to say, these are the goals you're working on, since we're getting 2 months into school year already.
No, I think I'm fine. No, I'm fine that the goals are set.
Okay, then.
They're exciting goals.
Then can I have a motion?
Sure. Yes, I'll have a motion to approve the goals going forward as that's said by Dr. Girardi.
Okay, a second?
Second?
Any further discussion on this? Then all in favor? All right. Next item on the agenda are school committee policies. These are all first read. So I will just go through them very quickly. We have...
Can we skip ahead, though?
What?
The estimate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Did I
good catch.
miss? Actually, I may have skipped over that.
Oh, yeah, we have a couple of agenda items, actually.
ABC fall,
We have 9 and 10.
The approval and then the...
Yeah,
No, we
turn-
did 9.
Approval of Dr. Girardi, FY15 ABC board member.
Yeah, that's the next one. Approval
Okay,
of...
sorry.
Whether it's 9 or 10.
No, 10 is the charter, yeah, 10 is approval of Dr.
Okay.
Girardi's.
Depends which agenda you're looking at, they're numbered two different.
there are a couple.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different than my thing, so that's why.
Oh, yeah, that's where I
That's
went
where you
off.
got, yeah, I had the numbers wrong. So, under the agenda item, approval of Dr. Girardi for the fiscal year 15 Assabet Valley Collaborative Board Member. Due to the new collaborative law, which is probably about a year and a half old now, Chapter 43 of the Acts of 2001, every year, the Collaborative Member District School Committee is required to vote on who will be the district representation on the collaborative board. Traditionally, it has always been the superintendents who are assigned to this task, but with the new law, school committee members can be approved to be the representative collaborative board member for that community. Attached, you will find the 2014-2015 Board of Director schedule for tentative topics and timelines. This document shows the dates, times, and topics being addressed for the meetings this year. And so if you look at those documents that I think Jamal raised, the one thing I'll say is that we're members of two collaboratives. The CASE Collaborative really saves us money on special ed transportation. They do a really good job at that. The Assabet Valley Collaborative really provides us a lot of special ed development, professional development, and programs for our students who might need those out-of-district programs we talked about and other programs. So one of the things that they have a rich tradition of providing time after that meeting called superintendent sharing, and this is an opportunity that I actually cherish to brainstorm with my colleagues in the region, then it's an 11-district region, about their challenges, and we learn from each other at these meetings, so it's really more than just being a board member and approving budgets and doing a lot of what you do. It's an opportunity for me to do a lot of what you do, oversight of the budget and that sort of thing, but it's also an opportunity for me to brainstorm. So it would be my pleasure if the Maynard School Committee tonight would approve me as being the Maynard Assabet Valley Collaborative Board Member for fiscal year 15.
Can I have a motion?
I move to appoint Dr. Girardi as the Assabet Valley Collaborative's board member.
Second.
Representing the Maynard schools.
Second that.
All right, any further discussion? Bob, I think basically looking at when meetings are being held, it's probably easier for you to go to them than any of us.
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense, so.
I'm really glad you want to go.
Yes.
It is a great group, it really is.
So all in favor? Okay.
In fact, that's where I met Charles, by the way, when he was
Nice.
superintendent in Northborough, Southborough, and he and I clicked.
Nice.
Okay, so then Assabet Valley Collaborative Quarterly Report.
So attached also in your documents, you will find the Assabet Valley first quarterly report. And many of these updates you are pretty familiar with because you've been getting quarterly reports, like the ever-changing implementation plans from the Department of Ed in relation to the collaborative law. There's talk about consolidating the collaboratives down to 6 different collaboratives. The reality is that the eastern region, our region, has a lot of collaboratives, and out west they have very few. And so those are all big picture debates, and there's some information in there because Kathy Cummins is very active on a state level, which is another thing that's wonderful about the Assabet Valley Collaborative. But there's one item I'd like to point out that identifies for me the outstanding services that Assabet Valley Collaborative provides its member. Under fiscal year 14 accomplishment, it identifies an added transportation contract that included a pilot of an in-district transportation for one of our districts. The story behind that item is that Neshoba lost its transportation vendor for its general education busing mid-year last year, and the Assabet Valley Collaborative worked with their vendor to get Neshoba School District a very competitive price replacement in short notice with a vendor that they've used for their special ed transportation services that they provide for other districts. The moral of this story that I'm sharing with you is that the collaboratives are like Assabet Valley are in a unique position of providing emergency services as well as cost-effective services in a regional manner for individual districts. And I know the superintendent, Neshoba, was very happy that they helped him through that major issue. So I hope that if we ever have a unique need, that Assabet Valley will be there for us. And that's just one of the stories behind the story that I wanted to share with you tonight. And there's really no need for approvals, it's just an
Okay,
update.
it's just an update.
It's just a
All right.
mandatory update according to the legislation.
Okay. All right, so now we move on to policies. My mistake is not past that. Since it is a first read, I will just go through it, just highlighting any changes to them. We are considering several policies. First one is number 13, program accessibility in all schools. It's just there's a reference to the Mass General Law that wasn't added in the legal reference at the bottom.
Actually, Bill, can I stop you for just a
sure.
second? So I actually have a lot of questions
okay.
or comments on some of these. Did we want to do the process a little bit differently that time because of that? Do you want me to go, like, ask
Okay, yeah,
for
we
each
can do,
one,
we can do
or-
each one, yeah.
Versus having to go back through and do some
Yeah.
of them again?
Yeah, that's fine.
So just for this one, it says that some areas in the schools are inaccessible. I know with our old high school, that was definitely true. With the building of the new high school,
Green Meadow is as well.
there are parts of it that
Well,
are inaccessible?
it does not meet American with Disability Act because of the
okay.
ramp in there. So in that case, if you have a student who needed to use a wheelchair or
Yep.
crutches or something,
The ramp is too steep or something?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But you'd have.
Oh, is it really steep? Oh, okay. I hadn't noticed, but okay.
The,
All right, then.
the accessibility would,
stand.
or the accommodation would be, is that student's classroom would have to be like on one of the lower
One of the lower floors.
levels, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, there are some things like that, so.
Oh, okay. I'm good with that then.
Okay. For number 15, professional workplace environment, educational environment. Just I noticed there was a typo in the cross-reference that the policy number was wrong. It's supposed to be 260, and it was just listed as 60 on that. For number 202, organization of administration, no changes on that. For school building administration, 205, no changes on that. 250, borrowing of school equipment, no changes. 271, searches. It was a typo on a policy in the cross-reference. It said 645, it should be 643. Number 351, grants, federal and/or state. Just a clarification that the legal reference is referring to Mass General Law. In 230, wellness, there's no changes initially on the policy, although, Colleen, were we expecting to get any update on the policy itself?
I only got the admin. I'll follow up.
Just follow up and see. There were changes to the administrative regulation, which, I mean, of course, we don't vote on, but just to show what the changes that are going through
Can I
with it.
go back a bit?
To
Just
the policy?
To the wellness one?
Yep.
530. It says the Maynard School District, and every place else we say Maynard Public Schools. I was
Oh,
wondering
okay.
about just being consistent with that, so swapping out district for schools.
Yeah. Or say public schools.
Maynard Public Schools instead
Maynard
of
Public
school
Schools. Oh, and
district.
then that's also in the last sentence there, that paragraph, therefore it is a policy of the Maynard Public Schools.
Okay, oh, two places in the first paragraph. Okay.
Yep.
All right. As I was saying, with the administrative regulations, there's some changes to that.
So do we, on the administrative regulation, though, I didn't have time to cross-check the, if you go down to point number 3, nutritional quality of foods, and then school meals, I didn't have a point to cross-check this against the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act, or whatever that is.
Okay.
But I read the 80-page summary sometime last year. I did, I read it. And it just seems to me that from memory that there are a number of things in here that might now be contradictory to what's in that new federal law, so.
I do know the Wellness Committee met, in fact, and Bob Kinch is a member of that Wellness Committee
Yeah.
to review this. One of the things, I don't know if, I think I put it in my blog, I don't know if you're aware of it, but when they met, I don't know if you remember last year, we changed some traditions and we,
Right.
instead of allowing certain foods or food celebrations during the school day, that has since gone away. Now this year, one of the changes that they made was to change the snack shack here at, so they've been making some changes. They did meet and Bob was involved in it.
No, that's
So-
not my question, though.
No, but my point is that in that conversation, even some of the snacks, like it was low-fat ice cream, so
Yeah.
it met those standards according to Bob. So he's aware of the standards, but we actually made it more rigorous than those standards by not even having it. So the point is, I think he's aware of all those standards and
No,
implemented.
no, I'm not saying whether or not he's aware, because I know we've talked to him about them, but just whether or not what's
It meets
listed,
it.
whether or not this administrative regulation is consistent, shouldn't it be consistent with that federal law?
Oh, referencing the federal law.
Not referencing, but
Consistent
just
with
to
it.
make sure that what we have here in our administrative regulation at least meets the standard or possibly exceeds the new standard set in the federal law, and if somebody just double-checked it.
Okay. Bullet number 3? Is that the one
Point
you're
number
talking?
3, school meals. Because it just,
I think something,
There-
an example would
Okay.
be is
So I can have Bob check it.
desserts such as cakes, brownie, cookies, Jell-O pudding will not be served more than twice in any given week. Just, is that still legal?
well, and
Right.
it says to offer a variety of fruits and vegetables to the extent possible. I mean, I don't think that meets the law anymore, to the extent possible. I think they're mandating a variety. It's like that, it's that kind of thing that I just,
Okay, you can have Bob look at it.
it's pretty stringent, so
Yeah.
I just thought someone who's familiar with it should take a look just to make sure we're, I mean, because that's what we're doing, right? Is
Yeah.
tightening
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
things
tightening
up,
it
so-
up.
I'll
Yeah,
have him review it.
Okay.
Thing is that our policy is pretty generic, and it's
Yeah.
really more of how the federal law influences it. So we need to have the administrative regulation up to date and current with it, so that's very appropriate.
yeah.
Also now when Bill dessert is spelled wrong.
Yeah, I know.
We're gonna offer
Hey, you know what?
desserts?
I didn't write this one.
That's one way to get them healthy.
Yeah, and so, like, and if you look to,
It's from the building deserts.
you know, footnote number 2, a whole grain is one that's labeled as a whole grain product or whole grain. They just have gone through a whole new definition of all of that stuff.
Okay.
And then I had another question on the meal times and scheduling on the next page. It all says, it's sort of weak in terms of saying should. Is that something that we want to make stronger? Like, should schedule meal times at appropriate times, like between 11 and 1? Do we want the flexibility to schedule outside of those hours? I mean, do we serve lunch at 10:30 or
Some school districts have to, too. Yeah.
high school?
Because the cafeteria is so small.
Oh,
We had to go to 3 lunches,
10:30?
Right, so that's
10:45, I think.
right.
Quarter of 11, okay. But, okay. Should just seem sort of weak. And then on the, I'm sorry, I have a lot this
Thank
time, I apologize. So to turn the page, and then you see the bold where it says elementary schools and middle and high schools.
Yep.
I was wondering if we might want to specify the grades rather than the elementary schools, because we have elementary school grades at the Fowler School, and it's
Right.
not a middle school. I feel a little bit of a stickler on that. So, and I also think, just judging from my daughter's, what I can glean from my daughter's lunchtime experience, that she falls more under the middle school, and she's in 4th grade. So I would maybe say for, rather than the elementary schools, say for K through 3, and then 4 through 12, because I think that represents more of what we do.
Okay.
And the beverages, just as I'm looking at it, it says, are flavored beverages still allowed, like the flavored milks under the Healthy Kids Free?
Yeah.
Is this, oh, okay.
They took the strawberry out.
You wouldn't get the federal funding if you didn't.
Right, I know I'm on the committee of the
Yeah.
Wellness Committee, so I know they did look at the guidelines, and I do believe everything was in the new guidelines.
Or you wouldn't get it.
Right. You wouldn't-
Yeah, no, I know that. My question is like, to what extent it's reflected in what we have written in the
Yeah, so
administrative
we have
regulation?
chocolate, but we do not offer the
Okay,
strawberry.
okay. Okay, well, he can take a look at the whole thing, I guess. And then, on the final page of the administrative regulation, we have some language on celebrations, on food offered for classroom and school celebrations. So I'm just wondering if somebody should check that to make sure it matches our current our current wellness?
That's the one that was changed last year, and it was tough changing traditions.
It
and-
was.
Yeah, but,
Well, no, but this says student birthday celebrations. Oh, will no longer include food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I
Yeah.
was-
And income celebrations.
No, oh, I know that.
It's a
No, I read
huge
it too
change.
I read that too quickly.
and it was a huge change last year, so my hope is it's incorporated and we just move forward.
Okay, nope, that's my mistake. I'm sorry. I read too quickly. My bad.
It's okay.
I'm done.
Okay. Then moving on, number 532, medication for students, no change in the policy, although, Colleen, is this one of the ones that we might expect an update? Okay. Are the school nurses working on it, or just one individual?
The nurses.
The nurses.
Yeah, okay, they are updating policies, and we've gotten some back, but they're still working on it. Figure that we at
Okay.
least get it going through a first read.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
at least we get it back, so at least we can keep track of trying to approve these
Oh, okay.
for it. So this may be updated, same thing with the administrative regulations on student medications as
So,
well.
One thing here, I'm sorry, I'm gonna be a
No, no
stickler
problem.
tonight. We changed from like a student's personal physician to student's family physician to PCP. That sort of, and I think it's correlates to like the age
And
of the
that is
document.
that is in the,
So this medication for students, so I was just wondering.
that's in the admin.
No, I'm looking at policy 532.
Okay.
The third line down.
Oh, okay.
And it says the student's personal physician. So I'm just saying, through all of our various policies, we reference whatever medical professional the student might be seeing in 3 different ways, as family physician, student physician, personal physician, doctor, and PCP.
Okay.
So I was just wondering if, since PCP, it tends to be more of the current language, if we just might want to update
Okay.
in those areas, just also for consistency.
Okay. And, okay, so far, the administrative regulation has not been updated. School health program, number 641. Again, it's just changes on the policy, it's just changes on the cross-references, because we discontinued policy 531 and replaced it with 530. There's also some other Mass General laws that reference student health or school health programs. In the administrative regulation, it's just more correcting a typo, and then changes in how we conduct the BMI screening. Actually, it is still screening.
So I have,
Yeah.
this is 641.1.
Yeah. So
Do we have a religious exemption for immunization?
Yes,
And I didn't see that stated in here.
it's federal law.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I thought there might
And
be
in
something.
Massachusetts state law.
Okay. The doctor would know.
Yeah.
I just don't see that we state a religious exemption. Is that something that should be included, or?
I'll check into it.
Okay.
Okay. Basically, just on the second page, it's just changes of what grades are being screened for the different hearing, vision, actually, that is just changing who is doing that for the postural screening, and also with the BMI calculation. And then related to that, in the dismissal of students, 641.2, it's just a deletion of the third paragraph. And in 641.3.
Let's go back to 641.2.
Sure.
So in this one, I think we just say parent, and then everywhere else we do parent/guardian for the student.
Oh, okay.
And when we have here, the school notes will continue to attempt to reach the child's parents /guardian. Do we have any limits on that, frequencies? Is there any requirement to close the loop? I mean, that just seemed to me to be a little bit open-ended. Should anything go wrong at any point? Do you know what I mean? I'm just imagining here that a parent isn't contacted and I don't know, maybe it's fine the way that it is, so this is generally a question, but I was just thinking, you continue to attempt...
Are you referring to the
Sorry.
last paragraph?
Point one, I'm sorry,
Okay.
not clear. Last sentence, the nurse will continue to attempt to reach the child's parents, and it actually is repeated in paragraph 2, last sentence. Is it mandatory for the nurse to continue to try to reach the parents, or is it mandatory that the nurse will keep calling until the parents are reached? Like does a parent have to, does the nurse have to close the loop on communicating if a child is sent home? Or can the nurse just try till 5 o'clock and be like, well, I made a couple phone calls, sorry if I didn't reach anybody? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming that our nurses have incredibly good judgment.
Well,
But-
so you notice before it talks about the child's emergency information form,
Yep,
and one of the hardest things is to keep that up.
yeah.
Oftentimes, we have a lot of families who they don't even have home phones anymore, they have cell phones or disposable cell phones. And so, the reality is our nurses do a great job of communicating with parents and getting a hold of them somehow. But there are unique circumstances where if you mandate it and it's not even possible.
Okay.
It would, it is a challenge sometimes for us to communicate because
So
those
that's why it's
cards
written
don't.
that way, where the
yeah.
nurse will continue
I
to
believe that
attempt
probably is
to-
why it's written that way.
Okay.
I mean, I think the difference would be is if, say, a child is sick at 9:30 and the nurse calls and gets voicemail, that's not saying I contacted the parent.
Right.
That means like, okay, in whatever, I'll just say arbitrary time of, 15 minutes, she tries again, and so forth and so on throughout the day for it. So, I mean, I'm thinking that's more the case of it. And at a certain point, though, if the child spends the day in the nurse's office because the parent or any other contact couldn't be, reached, they're going to have to be put on the bus or whatever, however, to get transported home.
But here it says, so this is, I tried to put on a little bit of a lawyer hat here, thinking that I think that's part of what we're trying to do. So if the parent is unable to pick up the child at school, the parents may designate a person, right? So you've got the emergency form, you call somebody else. I have no family that lives in town, so I have a lot of friends who I'm assuming would call me, but let's just assume a friend comes by and picks up your child and takes the child home with them.
Right.
And then the parent has a disposable phone, and there's no, so the parent then goes to the bus stop, and then, the child doesn't get off, and the bus driver says, and then we get an angry parent so I'm just wondering, do we have any, and maybe this is fine, and this is the way that we need to leave it, just for the reasons that you mentioned, because I actually didn't think about someone being unable to be reached.
Yeah, it's a challenge sometimes.
But, okay. I was just trying to avoid something in here being used against us, like saying you need to, like the loop need, but I guess there's probably more risk in saying you have to close the loop than there is in leaving it. It's a possibility that's open, so. All right, so I'll drop it.
Okay, in 641.3, it was just an addition of the injuries requiring parental notification. Basically is just sort of a carte blanche, sort of any other injury where it deems necessary by the school nurse. And and then lower in the next sentence, we basically, I guess we don't have health aides anymore. We just have school nurses. In 644, life-threatening allergies, no change to the policy itself. And I don't think was any, this one hadn't been, wait a second. Had this been? No, this one hadn't been updated. So maybe we'll get an update on that one.
Which one is this?
That's the life-threatening allergies.
Oh, okay.
The administrative protocol hasn't been updated yet.
Yeah.
So on the administrative protocol, there's again, the designation of elementary school level. And I just wondered if we wanted to put K through 3
Right.
in there. So that's on point 4 and point 5.
Well, for what part are you talking?
On the regulation 644-1?
Yeah.
Where it says elementary school level? Change
Oh,
that to
no
K
food
through
training.
3.
And on point 9, I have a question. It says, it's on the second page, Maynard Public Schools will have a standing order from the school physician for the administration of Benadryl and EpiPen when a person with a previously known allergy has a severe allergic reaction. Every other place it says student. Does this apply to students and staff? Because I'm assuming we might have some staff doing an EpiPen.
Right.
but
Yep.
Would that be worth specifying a student or staff member for some of these? Because everything else is written just focused on the student. I don't know, I'll throw that out there for discussion among the leadership
Where,
team.
what part is this?
I'm on number 9, on the
Next page.
Okay,
administrative
yeah.
regulation. And it just says, when a person with a previously known allergy has had a severe allergic reaction, does this policy
who does it
apply to
reference?
students and staff, or
We can ask.
just students? Do we need a policy for staff? I mean, presumably they have some health needs as well.
Mhm.
I don't. So I will just throw that out there, you can talk with the
Yeah,
nurses.
sort of, yeah, ask that, because I would take it that it could mean staff. I mean, it basically is, we want to be able to have the nurse, if somebody's having a severe allergic reaction, we want them to be able to assist.
Yeah.
And that could either be a staff member, that could be a parent coming in to, for a conference and having a reaction to something.
Right, right.
For it. So it could be anybody in the building.
But let's double check and make sure.
Yeah. So
I'll double check.
Okay.
I was just thinking maybe make it explicit about who you're talking about.
You know, I think that's another case where you want to leave it vague, because it could be somebody, working on the plumbing or something like that.
No, that's true. But then,
So-
are there other places here where it needs to be vague? Because that's the only place it says person.
Well, I think it's just with this, because it's a standing order.
Oh, I see.
So that way they
Oh,
have
okay.
the authority, so that way
Help any
somebody
person.
can't say, oh, you gave me an epi injection when, I don't feel like I needed it, or I wasn't having it. Like, they wouldn't have a legal recourse if it's in the school policy backing
okay.
up the school
Okay.
nurse for doing that, such action.
Okay,
That makes sense.
So that's a case where it would be good to leave it vague.
Okay.
This person, because that's all encompassing.
okay.
All right.
We'll ask their
All right.
intent on
So,
that.
we're covering a lot of policies and very good questions on that. So, no, not at all. I guess we're back to citizens' comments again. Any? All right. Members' comments and or questions?
Oh, by the way, I looked up, WIDA is World-Class Instruction Design and Assessment. Thank goodness for
Jamal
technology.
was ahead of you. He looked it up on his phone. The technological race for the definition.
I had to know. I wouldn't have been able to sleep tonight.
Where were the playground? 'Cause we noticed at town meeting, those appropriations that went from that obscene estimate for the roof went elsewhere, as we were talking about earlier. Any progress on the playgrounds?
There hasn't been any progress yet. There was the grant written by Jeff for the Fowler Playground. There was a separate grant written for improvements, and they're still kind of working on what the final plan is for the Green Meadow
Have we
Playground.
coordinated with that, so we don't wind up with another?
Well, so we have met to see if we could coordinate the two grants, and it didn't make sense on either side as we discussed it through with the Playground Committee. So we're kind of in a waiting pattern at this point. We're exploring some other potential options, but I don't know how that's going to go.
Okay. I don't know if any other members have received it, but I received an invitation to the high school National Honor Society induction, which is on this Tuesday at 7 in the high school theater. I don't believe I'll be able to attend, but I was wondering if anybody else wanted to.
And unfortunately, I love to go to that event because, I mean, these kids are incredible. These students, I shouldn't say kids, they're young adults at our high school are just amazing. And we've actually had conversation about how rigorous it is to get into it. We've been making it tougher. So these kids are pretty amazing. Students are pretty amazing. Unfortunately, it's the night of my course. That didn't work out so well. So if anybody could, I asked Principal Karagianis to, say a few words on my behalf, because I like to,
Right.
I like to be there. It's such a special time. So if anybody can go, that'd be great.
I'll forward the invite,
Yeah,
I'll
thanks.
make my apologies to that. The thing is, it's also election night, too.
I know.
So, when they were
Yeah.
planning it, but that was just one thing, so I'll take care of that. Any other comments?
We got to get a good communication specialist to get those calendars coordinated.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a good secretary.
Well,
really.
the other-
That's more exciting than watching election returns.
Yeah.
It's really one of my favorite nights of the year.
The other thing is, and I mean, kudos to Kevin for organizing a trip on the 11th for students to, I think it was Solomon Pond Mall. The only trouble was that he scheduled the bus to say leaving at 11 o'clock, which many students are involved in the Veterans Day Parade, which my wife kind of emailed back to him and said, hey, you might be getting more students if you had it
A little
later.
later.
So he just said, I didn't even think about the parade, so it's just changing on that. And the funny thing is, when I saw it, I thought the same thing as well, but my wife is more proactive on that, so. Dawn, you were going to say?
I just wanted to, just a quick recap, I just wanted to, I spoke with Kara from the Boston Globe as well, she called me, so I'm hoping I gave her a good overview on some things she was looking to flesh out for her article in Maynard. I was able to tour all 3 schools with Dr. Girardi on Monday to help me understand the buildings and the folks in the buildings, and I appreciate his time for that. And also Pete and Colleen have been amazing, sending me every document I can think of to ask to help me get ramped up. So I just want to say thank you, I appreciate your time on that. Other than that, nothing, I'm good.
Well, I'd just like to note that it is 7 after 9, and I feel we've had a really full, meaningful meeting. So we packed in a lot in a short time. So if there are no further comments or questions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you.